The transfer portal, Drake, is always crazy for everyone. So how crazy has it been for Utah? Really wild. There's actually been almost an alarming amount of Utah players in the portal. Now, as early as a few days ago, ESPN published an article talking about how many players amongst Power 4 teams have entered the portal. Utah has had the 8th most, up to 18. Wilson coming back will drop that down to 17. But honestly, by the time you guys are listening to this, and we're recording it just a day before, there could be even more players that enter the portal. So it's always changing. It's always crazy. Is this alarming for Utah? To me, it's not too much because there's only about 3 or 4 of those that I look at as tough losses, and 1 or 2 even in that like 4, I would say that's a big loss. But the fact that it's 18 is still a lot, obviously.
Yeah, this is usually what I would say when you lose 6, 7 guys. It's great. Good for your program. Positive attrition. There are dudes that are leaving that probably need to go elsewhere and are going to be contributors for you, or they could be, some sort of locker room cancer. And for Utah, you look at Sam Heward, who on paper is one of the best players to ever step foot on campus at Utah, being a 5-star out of high school. Right. Very much so on paper, right? And he's looking for his 4th school, I think it is now. So you got to really sift through who these guys are and why, but like in his case, right? Oh, no, a 5-star player is leaving you. Okay, buddy. He's a transfer portal player. So I don't think the sky is necessarily falling for Utah, but from Dejon Stanley to Jalen Glover to, there are a couple of guys you're like, oh, she took the damn punter. You're like, I've seen these names before. These guys have played football for the Utes. Yep. And I got out to 2 different Utah football games this last year. And you look at the quarterback room, it's decimated at this point too. Carson Ryan leaving and going to BYU. There is some room for concern here when you look at your offensive coordinator got fired midseason, your head coach, you didn't know if he was going to be back. Now he is back. And what is his outlook for next year when nearly 20 guys have entered the transfer portal for Utah? At the very least, you got to go, that's not great. Like there is some positive attrition there, but gosh, you just wish you could have developed a couple more of those players. If it was 10, I'd be saying, all right, cool, you're fine, positive attrition, whatnot. But 20, almost 20, there are a couple of guys in there that Utah could have used next season. And at that point, Kyle Whittingham, hey, old dog, new trick, you have to go in the transfer portal and make absolute waves. And at this point, at the time of recording, Utah has not landed a 4-star in the portal. I do think Dampier is a big pickup. You've gotten guys from A&M, Oregon, Mississippi State, some Big Ten, some SEC additions for the Utes. That trend has to continue if you want to compete in the Big 12. Colorado brought in 43 players last offseason. You don't have to do that, but Utah is going to have to hit the portal hard. And for what you lost, you need to gain to compete next year when Colorado is in this conference. And they're going to continue to outpace you in the portal if you don't step it up. Utah is going to have to do that. It's not red button time yet, but it's not a great thing.
Yeah, it's not a great thing. I mean, but even Drake, you just said in the last segment, right, that you still expect this team to be a Big 12 title contender. So we're still feeling good enough about the pieces that were in place. You mentioned, look, the quarterbacks, all of them leaving, and I know Wilson's now back, is not a great sign. But honestly, it's an overall indictment on the previous offensive staff that failed. I mean, they really did. And yes, I know Brandon Rose had a nice quarter and moment against BYU, but also the week before that, he threw an interception that lost him the game against Houston. I'm not trying to dump on him. I'm just stating fact.
JT, I do think we have to at some point. Like I pointed the Baylor situation I mentioned a couple times where they bring in DeQuan Finn, they unload the Brinks truck to get him there in NIL, and then he stinks. I pointed a coach somewhere here and say, okay, who made that call as the talent evaluator? I pointed Kyle Whittingham and say, Andy Ludwig was a top 5 highest paid assistant in the country. And that was your guy. That was your decision to give him that amount of money. What kind of coach evaluator was Kyle Whittingham in the last couple of seasons? What went wrong with the Ludwig situation? And now I think you are seeing so many transfers because the offense was a complete dumpster fire. The coordinator hire is great, but you're reaping what you sowed with paying Andy Ludwig that kind of money, then having to fire him mid-season. I think, JT, we've got to look at Kyle Whittingham and say, hey, if there's anybody at fault here, it's not just, tumultuous offensive situation because of Ludwig. No, there was one guy who was keeping Ludwig in town and paying him a whole lot of money. It's Kyle Whittingham. I do think that's something to also keep in mind.
I agree with that. The only thing I'll say is I think Andy Ludwig, we have to give him credit for what he did with Cam Rising. Now, Andy Ludwig's indictment is that he was just bad at developing quarterbacks. That's a fact. It didn't go well. And the fact that he had a good relationship with Cam Rising and Cam Rising's play himself masked that issue. So that's where I'll give Ludwig credit. But look, when you can't develop the other guys, that's where the wheels ended up falling off, and it hurt Ludwig. So we talked about a lot of the guys that Utah entered the portal. Some of them developmental guys you hoped would have worked out. Other ones starters that'll leave. The Cameron Calhoun one hurts, but that's just, it seems like we said, NIL related. But the one that Drake I look at and I'm like, oh, like that one stings more than anyone else. Not as much as the loss of the player himself, but where he chose to go. Utah tight end Carson Ryan, who I looked at as the probable starting tight end. And they got Landon King back. Landon King's really good too. But Carson Ryan chose to leave Utah and go to BYU. And to me, that is a concerning thing when you choose to leave one school and go to the direct rival.
Yeah, it's the number 2 tight end in the country per 24/7 Sports. And that's a tough thing to lose for BYU.
He was the number 2 tight end. Wow. I don't know. And I know he had 200 back at UCLA. He did not even cross 150 yards last year, I didn't think.
And a lot of, you look at 24/7, a lot of this is based off their high school as well and previous and all kind of, their algorithm is out of whack at times. But yeah, Carson Ryan, but like you said, he was going to be the starting tight end. So it's not shocking that he's high rated as a tight end coming out of Utah, and he's coming out of tight end U. This is, if you want to go be developed in that position as a tight end, Utah has been the place to do it and has pumped out NFL caliber guys. Brant Keithy most recently, who I think was the best tight end in the country, at least in the Big 12, could have been in the country if not for injury. And for him to leave and then leave to go to BYU, it's like, okay, shoot. There's a probable starter who's gone to your rival. I thought Isaac Wilson would do the same thing. Obviously, he didn't. And that's the kind of guy you point to in the portal and you go, are the wheels falling off? You start to ask the question when a guy like that goes to your rival as your rival is poaching, hunting for tight ends. But to push back on that point, when you start to ask, oh, is this the downtrend? Is this the beginning of the end? Is Kyle Whittingham really losing it? Is the portal going to crush us? Go back to 2012. 5-7 Utah. They were already in the Pac-12 in 2011 and gone 8-5. They had showed success in that conference. Then immediately followed up with 5-7. All right, hey, everybody calm down. Statue coach. 5-7 again. Has he lost it? Have the wheels fallen off? Is Utah done? And then after that, 9-4, 10-3, 9-4. He's Kyle Whittingham. That's why we can't doubt Utah next season. The dude has done it before. He's going to keep doing it. What does he do? He wins. So we all got to calm down a bit.
He does win, and that's where, as much as I'm excited about the future of Morgan Scalley and Drake, I definitely think there is a world where a year from now we are talking about it was a mistake for Kyle Whittingham to come back, because there was obviously program problems with the things that went wrong with Utah overall organizational. But still trust Kyle Whittingham's body of work, as you mentioned. Think he's the right guy to lead this team. And overall, there have not been too many alarming transfers. The number is, you don't love the number, but when you change and get a new offensive staff with how bad Utah's offense was, it's going to be understandable. You get a lot. So curious to see what Utah does the rest of the transfer portal season. And obviously every move that Utah makes is to eventually try and get back to the college football playoff. That's what we want to talk about. Not just the current college football playoff, but especially if it'd be good for not just Utah, but all of the Big 12 to expand the CFP to more teams. We're going to be discussing that possibility in one moment. But first, before we talk about the future of the college football playoff, why would we do that when we can talk about how great the present is looking? Because today's episode of Locked On Utes is also brought to you by the college football playoff. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup at the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. That's right. You can stream it on Max as well. College football playoff is going to be live on TNT at 11 a.m. on Saturday, and then against Clemson and Texas on Saturday as well later on. TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. You don't want to miss a moment of the action. Check out the college football playoff this weekend.